Welcome to the On-Premise IT podcast from Gestalt IT, the only show that dares to be both on topic or on-premise, and yes, on location, on premises. Today's premise relates to the use of AI in security and the idea that maybe, just maybe, security is the one area that AI is actually useful. Before we get into that, though, let's meet who's on the panel today.
My name is Michael Levan, and I do everything Kubernetes and containerization, so consulting, books, content, all that good stuff.
W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup, and everything he said about Kubernetes, just replace it with backup, and you got me.
Hi, I'm Karen Lopez. I'm Data Chick on Twitter. I am everything about data, no matter whether it's in the cloud, on premises, or on premise.
Well, it's going to be on premise this time. So, and I'm Stephen Foskett, organizer of Tech Field Day, publisher Gestalt IT, and enthusiast of all things cloud and security related. So while we have you here, of course, it's 2023, so the topic of AI has come up, let's say, a lot. And we've had the usual shenanigans of having ChatGPT generate goofy things for us during the discussion. We've had the usual arguments over the fact that people are using generative AI and large language models for all the wrong reasons in all the wrong places. And yet, for a long time now, ever since I was recording the Utilizing AI podcast, I have said that security was an area that AI generally, machine learning more specifically, deep learning even more specifically, and yes, even large language models could be extremely useful because, frankly, security often is sort of find the weird thing in this group, in this set of data. And frankly, generative machine learning, AI, that's what this stuff is good for. So am I right in saying that security is one area where AI is actually useful?
I would say that it's important to differentiate at a high level, right? Because we only have 27 minutes, not 3 years. AI, like the first piece of it is simply just gathering data sets. The other piece of it is, the human factor of being able to have a conversation with a robot or a machine or whatever. From a data set perspective, yeah, absolutely, because we don't have to write a million policies. We don't have to put all of this stuff in place when it's already there for us. And if we can slap AI on it, that would work out way better than us having to have all this information and collect it ourselves and then go and create policies around it.
So you're talking about using generative AI to generate policies and templates and rule sets and things like that.
Or even simply just to give us the best practices. What should we be doing in this environment? Well, it's going to go to its data sets and it's going to look at tons of data that would take us way longer. It's going to collect it, give us that information, then we go and we implement.
Yeah, I think for me it's about, when you're looking at us, you mentioned it earlier, when you're trying to figure out something has happened, something bad might be happening. The best way to do that is something looks weird. Well, the problem with that is it's really hard to do as a human. You have to just look at all the things. You end up with so many false positives. You end up with basically at some point just not caring, right? And so I think machine learning is perfect for that. Just look at all my stuff. Look at all my network connections. Look at all my files that are being created. Look at all my backups that are being created. And get to know how they look. And then suddenly one looks a bit odd, right? Gee, that backup's never been that big. Gee, no one's ever logged in from Russia before, right? And then hand that to a human being. And so I guess I'm strongly agreeing. I don't know if your first comment, which was it's the only thing AI and ML is good for, but I think it's definitely, at least in IT, I think this idea of using machine learning to identify patterns and identify things that don't fit those patterns is a huge use for it.
And so I both agree with you guys and disagree.
Sweet.
So one of the things is, I just think we should admit here that we're all going to use the AI terms probably imprecisely. So we're going to use AI just because it's a good general term, even though all the cases that we're going to talk about are going to be little slivers of those things. So I agree that looking for anomalies is a great machine learning task and everything. my concern about it is, especially from the demos I've been to and other webinars and things, is that the models get trained on very large enterprises generally. And then if you go to use it on a small and medium business where people are more jack of all trades, where DBAs are also sysadmins and ops people, that it won't do as well because it's been trained on huge separations of duty of someone who only has an access to a sliver of the files. And it's going to start, doing things, especially if it has that second step that everyone's talking about for ransomware, which is automatic remediation, like kicking them off, shutting down blocking their IP, shutting down all their access, deleting the files they just downloaded. That's my concern here. So it all comes down to responsible use of it.
Yeah, and then I think the other piece of it is, like, to your point, having the right data to be able to feed it. So correct me if I'm wrong here, but ChatGPT, it's pulling data sets from 2021, which in tech, that might as well be 30 years. So like
Good point.
having the right data sets to be able to feed this machine or AI or whatever we want to call it, that's going to be drastically important in anything that we do, including security.
I think that's why you really, for a proper machine learning setup, you need to be training it on your environment, right?
I think both,
it should
right?
have, you can use that large model and you're like, oh, clearly this is ransomware, this is an attack. But you can also train it in your environment. Perhaps you're this weird environment that encrypts stuff a lot, randomly encrypts files,
Or
right?
in bulk.
Or in bulk, encrypts in bulk would be really bad, very triggering. And so it's got to get to know, and also your environment may have lots of people logging in from foreign countries randomly and often, right? And so it's got, for these models to work, it's got to be trained on your world. But again, I just to go back to the beginning, it's like, I don't know anything else that can do this better than that, right?
Yeah, kind of like democracy, right? Not perfect, but probably the least worst model we have.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
whatever that quote goes.
Yeah.
And I think to your point about these models being trained, I think it's important to recognize too that, yes, they're trained on a data set, but then they are fed data. So it's not like ChatGPT can only function on things that existed before 2021. It just fundamentally is stuck in, just like me, I'm stuck in the 80s. It's fundamentally stuck in 2021. And so you can give it new data and it'll be able to access that, but it won't be able to really fundamentally alter who it is, what it is, not who it is, but what it is, because that's what it was trained on. But to Karen's point, I think it's important to keep in mind too that what it was trained on matters, because as we've seen with a lot of the exploits against ChatGPT, and in terms of like prompt attacks and so on, once it's been trained on things, it's kind of there and it's a black box. And I think that's, to me, is the scariest thing about machine learning, is that it really is a black box. We don't know why it's making the decisions it's making. And people can, just like a black box, they can experiment with it and poke at it and figure out kind of what pushes its buttons. And that could cause problems in security. So I know I'm the one that said it was useful. And I said it because of the things Curtis said, was because it's really good at finding needles in haystacks. But if we start relying on it, I think it's pretty likely that the firewall AV model, machine learning model that is useful to detect, bad occasions, or the anti-ransomware ML model that's used to detect ransomware, is going to have all sorts of fun, clever exploits uncovered to keep it from seeing the needle when the needle passes by.
And I think to that point, and what everybody's kind of saying is, at a high level, again, we're taking a whole bunch of data, feeding it this thing, and then it's going to tell us the anomaly. So really what we're talking about is aggregation of logs, of data, of whatever. And, to bring it up, because I have to, because it's Kubernetes, there's this one project, this open source project called Kate's GPT. And one of the things that it's doing is, like, let's say you have tons and tons and tons of logs in your cluster. It'll just tell you exactly what you're looking for, like the most important piece from whatever perspective, from a security perspective, whatever. It'll essentially aggregate all this data for you and just give you what you need. And I think that's like just outside of security in general, but that's another huge part of it is taking all of that data that we wanted to be able to read, but more importantly, telling us what we need to know with that data.
Yeah. And I think that like the thing that excites me most when I see these demos is the whole concept of behavioral analytics, which is what we're talking about here. And that maybe it'll even do things like help find good behaviors that are happening. And also find out when not necessarily something bad is happening, but something has just gone wrong. Like a department or employee whose productivity working with data has all of a sudden fallen off because something changed in the feeding system or something. Like I see it going beyond security, but focused on the data. The things that I'm most worried about are the generative ones. So we've seen a lot recently in the news about Copilot, about generating code, about generating databases, generating policies, is that I'm worried that people can stuff things into the models that, if it's generating 1 million Azure security policies, who's going to review that?
Yeah, it is a good point. I mean, it's the same thing as just code in general, right? Like,
Yeah.
how do we get malware? Because malware code is shoved into application code, and then around and around we go. So it's very much the same problem, unfortunately. Yeah, totally get it.
So how do we fix that? No, go ahead.
Yeah, Stephen's point about that there will be exploits. There will be exploits to this model, but it doesn't mean we have to use what we have. It's the best tool that we have for this scourge that we are presented with. We've got to get past this. We're already in the point in the backup world where backup isn't good enough, right? That they've now gone to the double extortion, they call it, right? That the first thing they're going to do is exfiltrate the data. And so to me, it's like the number one thing that means we now have to stop is exfiltration.
Yep.
Well, the only way to stop that is to find out that it's going on, right?
Right.
And you are never going to see that as a human being. But your network infrastructure can see that and go, why are we suddenly uploading data to Dropbox, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever, but the handful of sites, right?
Or why is this person all of a sudden
Yeah.
downloading the customer list? They've never done that before. And the only reason they have access is they do minor updates as a backup, not a backup, as a secondary resource
Yeah.
for that. And all of a sudden, why are they doing that?
Yes, why is this, just to, think of a random occurrence, why is this young National Guardsman who's supposed to be maintaining the IT system suddenly downloading secret NSA files?
What made you think of that?
Yeah, I just thought of that one off the top of my head. And you'd think, to what Michael brought up at the beginning, you would think that people would have programmed the systems to do that. You'd think that there would be like a regular expression that says like, if IT nerd, and data source equals secret NSA stuff, then don't give them. You'd think that somebody would create like, that's my own language of configuration. It's just like YAML, and
Well,
and yet no.
but that could be a way where a language model could help, where you could just talk to a computer and go, I don't know if like this happens and this happens and that's happening. Can you just not let that happen? And then it could figure out, like that's kind of what you said in the very beginning, is it could help you create those policies. But then of course we got to check those policies because,
Well, what you said as well. Right. Well, what you said around the anomalies and what you're saying as well, where it's like that data, of, hey, this person's downloading something, warning, it's there. Maybe it's there, but what's our problem? The problem is that there are gigs and gigs and gigs of logs. Engineers can't.
We're drowning in data.
Right. They certainly don't want to, nor do they have the time to go through all of that. So they need a way to be able to parse that data out. And we have those methods, but those methods are compared to something like AI. It's very manual. It's a very manual effort to be able to retrieve that data and actually do something with it. That's the most important thing, right? We can have logs all day, but if we're not doing anything about it, that's our problem.
Well, and some people choose to log events and for monitoring purposes just for in case they get sued, like more of a defensive thing, and they're not using them for anything else. And I think that has also changed. I've noticed in the industry that people are seeing the logs can be something proactive, not so much, in case something goes wrong, we'll go find out who did it, but being able to detect those things off the top. And you're right, we couldn't even write reports on it.
Something you said earlier that gave me an idea. So, it's like, again, Stephen accounting. So we've noticed that every time Stephen accounting, if he's on the internet more than 3 hours, something bad happens, right? So maybe the model, we could put together, how you have like the know before the training, right? Well, Steve always fails the know before training. So how about we tweak up the monitoring on whenever Steve ever goes online? Could we do something like that to basically, again, connect the dots for us? I don't know.
And ironically enough, this is just popping into my head now. I think this will make us write better software. Why? Because when you're looking at logs, for example, when you're reading these warnings and these errors, this didn't just magically appear, right? When we're writing software, we're putting those errors and those warnings into our application code. That's why we can see them in logs in the first place. So if we have the ability to say, oh, wait, we have an easy way to parse these things now to make our jobs easier, create policies, it's going to make writing software as an engineer, I'm going to be like, I'm going to put all of this stuff in now because I know it's actually going to be used later on.
Log all the things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that actually reminds me of one of the things that came up on utilizing AI, this sort of perverse thing where because you can use machine learning to parse more data and to extract more value from the data, therefore you collect even more data. So in other words, if the amount of data that a person with manual rule sets can handle is, n, log level 2, the amount of data that a machine learning system could handle is more like log level 8, And so therefore, because we have this technology, we can turn the logs up to log level 8. Whereas we never could before. And I think that was one of the interesting aspects that came out. And again, one of the reasons that I feel like this technology is particularly useful for security and particularly useful in areas like Kubernetes and the cloud, because like you're saying, we can actually enable a lot of this debugging that we never would have looked at before.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's going to make writing software a way better experience now because we're actually going to be able, because, for every application that I've written, every piece of software that I've written, we put errors in and we put warnings in and we put if-else statements in, and if this thing fails, let us know. But the reality is the software is letting us know, but by the time we get to it, there's been 200 more lines of logs that have popped up and we don't even know that it's there. And that's a huge problem in itself.
Yeah, so log all the things, back up all the logs. Because, when you have a ransomware attack or any kind of cyber attack, the first step is forensics, right? To figure out what has happened. And I know that I've been involved in a number of attacks where the first thing we need to do, get all the logs that we can for the last however many days. And if you're not backing up those logs or in some way putting them in some system,
them,
right, then you're not going to be able to do that. But it doesn't really go to the on-premise, but I just had to say the thing.
But there's a flip side to that too, and that is that if you turn log level up to 8 for every machine, and if you have machine learning processing it and getting all the good stuff out, there's a good chance that you're not going to archive the logs. There's a good chance that you're then going to dump those logs because we already got all the good stuff out of them.
We think we have.
Which means we no longer have the information to go and find the things that it missed.
Back up all the logs.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Turn the log level up to 8 and
You'll
back
never
them all
hear
up.
me say anything else.
And the other thing is, if we go to our legal teams, they're going to tell us log level minus 100 because don't keep any evidence unless you're legally mandated. And I wonder how this is going to, I wonder how the sort of butterfly effect of doing all this AI is going to come up in court. And then people are going to be like, oh yeah, we should delete things.
Yeah, so they will, it's a continual problem in my world, right? But what you're seeing now is actually legal driving the process. For example, the company wants to get cyber insurance, and the cyber
Yes.
insurance says you need to do these 10 things, some of which some people don't want to do. So that's that's definitely helping out there.
Yeah.
And even, like thinking about, regardless of the environment that you're in, like for example, healthcare, like I've done a lot of healthcare in the past, and we've done the high trust certifications and HIPAA compliance and this and that. And a lot of it means you have to save data for, let's say, 7 years. So then I have to think to myself, well, if log level is up to 8 and we're saving everything, that means we have to get extra budget for storage.
Yep.
Because we're going to be saving way more than we did prior. So now this is another problem in itself.
And your logs could end up being bigger than your data.
Right.
Maybe not image data, but bigger than your source data.
Yeah.
If only there was a storage technology that was really reliable, more reliable than disk, and like a tenth of the price.
Yeah.
Rhymed with.
Yeah, I wonder what
Yeah.
if you like just passed that storage underneath like a read and write head,
Right.
and stored it on a
Right.
spool
And
of
it
some
was like,
sort.
and it used no power
Yep.
for like 30 years.
That's all
but
make
could hold on to
believe.
the
Yeah.
data.
I can't believe it.
Someone's going to invent that someday.
Somebody.
Like wireless cable was my favorite
Right.
thing for DV. I have one, Stephen.
Go
so
ahead.
this comes from my world, and it's security related, but it's primarily data. So the things that are coming, or that are here or coming, that I really want to see is AI and machine learning that assists you in finding where all your data is, even the spreadsheets, even the rogue file shares, even the rogue NAS things plugged in, and then helps you classify and categorize that data. So yeah, if someone is storing a spreadsheet for the latest pool on who's going to get fired first, okay, maybe no one cares. But if someone has downloaded the customer data and is now doing all their work off a spreadsheet on their local laptop and nobody knows about it, we not only want to know the inventory, but the fact that this laptop has credit card information, health information. And before, when we had to do that, we looked at column names of tables and CSV headers. Now we can look at the actual data and profile it better to say, that looks like a medical chart.
Man, but I love writing Excel macros.
I know.
I don't want anything to help me with that.
No, we're not going to stop you from doing it. We're just going to label it and not allow you to mail it to yourself to your Gmail account.
Oh, I'm totally kidding. Just get rid of the Excel macros all the way.
I know, but to me, this is a security thing. Like, you can't secure things that you don't know exist in your
Right.
enterprise, that you don't know what's in those spreadsheets or that PDF or that JSON file, because they have to convert all the spreadsheets to JSON because the JSON people hate Excel.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think whether it's internal or external, I think you have to start with, there are ways to basically block shadow IT, right?
Yeah, I was
right?
just making that part up.
Yeah. Block shadow IT and allow what needs to be allowed, right?
Yeah.
Nobody should be using Dropbox to store corporate data unless Dropbox is our corporate solution, right?
Right.
That can be easily blocked,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And honestly, block all those services, the Dropbox-like features, if your company isn't using them,
Yeah.
right? That would stop a lot of this exfiltration.
It would a
Right.
lot, except for the shadow cloud IT, where just someone has signed up for a free developer's account.
That is a real problem, right?
And it's totally unrelated to your systems.
Yeah,
They've personally
yeah.
done it. They get $200 credit and free services for a year, like on Azure or Google. And they decided, because they wanted to use a certain data visualization tool, not the ones that we provided,
Right.
or they want to use, I don't know.
But that's the problem is
Yeah.
every time you try to close the door, somebody opens a window.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
But these scanners now, that smart scanners,
yeah.
can go find that.
Yeah, and they can, well, we can, so we can't block Amazon, right? We can't block AWS or Azure, but we can watch for it
Yes.
and go, Karen's never used AWS before. Karen, where are you using AWS? And you're like, what's AWS?
What is
But yeah, we
AWS?
can.
I have
But
no idea
again,
what
that's
you're talking about.
that's another use for this for
Yeah.
the model, right? Is to watch what people are doing, and look for them accessing the things that we don't want them to access. We
Yeah.
can't, you're right, we can't block it.
So what I'm hearing is that you guys want the AI overlords to monitor everything we do and report us to the supervisors
On our-
whenever we do anything unusual because it could be illegal.
Exactly. Exactly.
Minority Report.
Wait, but remember, I said we could also give out gold stars for behavior. Like some abnormal behavior is also good.
Yep.
Yeah, well, you don't have to assume that Karen's on AWS doing something bad, right? You just say, reach
uploading
out,
cat photos.
oh, Karen's on the new thing, right? Karen's
Yeah.
on the new project, or oh, you're uploading cat photos? Well,
Yeah.
that's great. Can you not do that on your corporate laptop, right?
Yeah.
That you didn't do anything wrong,
That's
just
right.
don't do it again.
But a lot of this
Right.
stuff is really hard to turn off. I mean, I guess
Yeah.
you guys have probably seen the story about the woman who tried to not use the cloud at all for
Yeah.
anything
Yeah.
and essentially couldn't do anything anymore because literally everything uses the cloud.
Right.
And I think that that's one of the problems back to the AI topic. We're seeing OpenAI generally, ChatGPT specifically, being integrated into so many tools that I don't think you could shut off. I think already, and it's only been available, it's still only a preview technically, and it's only been available for a few months, and I don't think you could turn off ChatGPT today if you wanted to, because I think it would break enough. And I think next year at this time, ChatGPT and Google AI and Microsoft AI and Oracle AI, I think these things are going to be essential services, just like Amazon Web Services, and we won't be able to block them. And we won't really even be able to control what they're used for because everything will use them.
Like the internet, not just cloud, the internet. Yeah.
Well, unless you adopt a block everything and only allow what's allowed.
But it's
Yeah, and
almost
that's
going to
gonna
be
work real well.
abstracted.
It
Yeah.
works in a lot of companies where this actually matters, right?
Yeah.
It's where if you're in a
Yeah.
yeah, thank you, a skiff, right? Where it's like you can't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really the only way to do it like fully, right?
Exactly, and that's the
but-
problem is because we're not in a skiff, and most people aren't, and even the military and even the intelligence agencies have people walking around with personal cell phones and watch TikTok videos and compromise locations and stuff like that. I mean, I think it's really, really challenging to actually turn stuff off, and
Say what's easy.
and we're getting off topic here.
Yeah,
a little bit,
I know.
But I think that kind of I want to give you guys a chance to summarize. So basically, my premise was that security is the one place that machine learning is going to be very, very useful. Are you in agreement or are you not in agreement? Karen?
I think I'm 7 out of 10 in agreement.
Okay.
So very, very useful, I agree with. But I'm also very, sometimes skeptical of what Dave in accounting is going to do with it.
Yeah, I'm in 100% agreement. There will be a new problem that we then have to solve.
Yeah.
We just don't know what it is yet.
Yeah, it's definitely going to make it easier to go through the data that we can't go through manually, tell us what's going on, and create remediations around it.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a fun conversation. It's fun to be on premises for today's On-Premise IT podcast. Before we go, where can we connect with you and continue this conversation?
I'm Data Chick on almost all social media, so find me there.
WC Preston and backupcentral.com.
Michael Levan on LinkedIn and the NJ DevOps guy on Twitter.
And as for me, you'll find me at Foskett on most social media networks. You'll also find me here on the On-Premise IT podcast, on Utilizing Tech, our Monday podcast, and on the Gestalt IT Rundown, our Wednesday news podcast. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the On-Premise IT podcast. For more episodes, go to gestaltit.com/podcast. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.